Welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen's Call podcast with host Lane Nordland.
Hello, everyone. It's time for today's Cattlemen's Call podcast. Welcome back, Lane Nordland. Happy to be with you here today. And as we continue to have conversations that help the cattlemen and women out in the countryside, we're going to focus a little more on a different subject area here today, highlighting some pasture management opportunities that producers can participate in. Join us here today is Scott Flynn and Damon Palmer with Corteva, and they're going to be discussing some tools and opportunities producers can utilize out in the countryside. But before we go any further, Damon and Scott, let's just learn a little bit more about both of you. Damon, could you talk more about your background and maybe your growing up in agriculture or how you got into the business?
Sure. So I've been in the industry now going on 22 years. This is my 22nd year, and I am a proud graduate and alumni of Clemson University. Came out of their animal science and ag econ program. And before that, I was not raised on a farm. Came from a family where mom was from a farm, dad wasn't, so we didn't end up on the farm, but grew up in and around it and worked on it through college or through high school, and just have a great love for all of agriculture. But started working with cattle at an early age, as well as row crops. Went on to get that animal science degree. And through my history at Dow Agrisciences and now Corteva, I've just had the good fortune of working in various businesses and worked in herbicide business. I've been able to work in the seed business, some advanced technology, and find myself here with the privilege to lead our pasture and land management business, where we really focus on land management outside the core cropping area, and cattle ranchers and helping them steward the land is a key part of what we do. So it's been a great career thus far, and really just enjoy being able to work with farmers, ranchers, and have been able to do that over the last couple of decades.
Now, Scott, you're a Clemson alumni too, is that what I heard?
No, not Clemson alumni. No, actually, I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, and like many others in Eastern Kentucky, we grew tobacco and cattle. Those were the two primary things growing up, and if you've ever had any experience with tobacco, you'll understand why I ended up in cattle. There's always a time when you look back and the best day I ever had in the tobacco field was still worse than the worst day I ever had working with cattle. But went on to college at Eastern Kentucky University, and really gained a love for agronomy. And so I started pursuing forages as my primary focus. Went on to the University of Kentucky and to get my master's in plant and soil science, again focusing on forages. And then I finished up my education at Iowa State University, where I worked on growing different forage crops with corn as a year-round cover crop. Ended up working for Corteva straight out of my PhD program in range and pasture. That's where my passion lies, and so here I am today, getting to advise cattle farmers, doing research. I don't think I could ask for any better.
Of course, I think sometimes pasture condition in the past has got overlooked about the importance of inputs that need to be put out on the land, and also just the importance of soil health along with that. And it's more of a conversation we are having more and more as we look at sustainability, at conservation, and how farmers and ranchers truly are stewards of their land. Scott, when you're out in the countryside, what are some of those key things, maybe some concerns you hear from producers, maybe some questions you have from producers when you're out in the field, just talking with them over the hood of your pickup?
I think probably the most common issue I run into, while I do work in weed control for pastures, weed control is a symptom of usually something else going on. And the first that I always start looking at would be the grazing system that they have. Any time that we can implement a grazing system on a farm that allows forages to rest and recover, and a system that does not graze too close to the ground so that those plants can properly rest and recover. Those are the keys, I think, for good production. People who ignore that a lot of times open up their pastures to a lot of weed problems, poor water infiltration, very poor root development in the pasture, and so that leads to a decline in soil health. So when I walk out into a pasture, a lot of times I'm looking at the grazing system that has caused a lot of the issues in that field.
And Damon, on your aspect of it, what are some of the goals that Corteva has, short-term, long-term, and whether it's outreach and having boots on the ground like Scott, or just having products available to go out there and help these producers and help the land as well?
Well, this is a very key market segment for Corteva. And we've recently come through and finished up a merger. We've put together the Dow business, the DuPont business, and the Pioneer Seed business, and we've done that over the last couple of years. And so we had a lot of questions a couple of years ago when we introduced the Corteva name and kind of started to phase out of the little Dow Diamond, which has been in the ranching business for over 50 years. And so we had a lot of questions about, what is your focus, what is your commitment on this industry going forward? And we're extremely excited, we're extremely proud to hear that a lot of the things that we talked about as far as future innovations coming to market are truly coming to market, coming to fruition. And so I think we said back then in 2018 that we were planning to launch 3 new products in 3 years. We've actually right now we've got eyes on launching 4 new products in 3 years. So we've exceeded that, with the last one still pending EPA registration. So new technology is a key indicator, I think, of our commitment to this market segment.
So, Scott, when you're out there looking to help manage weeds, what are some of the top priorities that you engage with producers on, and opening up that conversation that maybe they haven't put a plan into place to help manage weeds?
Yeah, I think it always starts with the observation that they're looking for more acres, and they would like to increase the size of their cattle herd. And I always start the conversation off with have the mindset of a row crop farmer that you're trying to optimize profit per acre. For every acre that you're using, let's try to get the most out of that. So that leads into that whole topic of weed control, soil fertility, or just soil health, where we're trying to increase the production of that pasture, increase the carrying capacity. So that's usually those are the places where I start. We tell producers that for every pound of broadleaf weeds that you can control, you'll usually get more than 1.5 pounds of forage in return. And if you look at the cost of herbicides, that is some cheap feed compared to going out and buying hay or buying supplements. So getting them in the mindset that acre, we're trying to optimize the production on that acre, and that the investments to do that are much smaller than going out and renting more land or buying more land is key. Cheapest real estate a cattle producer will ever buy will be the acre that they gain when they get their weeds under control.
Damon, anything on that you want to?
So as we work with ranchers, we look at range land, we look at pasture land. That is probably their single largest asset. It's extremely valuable, and so we really seek to look at ways where we can partner with them through our network of specialists and maximizing their return on that asset. And that's really how we work with them to look at that.
Maybe let's talk about the collaboration that you have in trying these new products out in the field, and how important it is for producers to be open to that collaboration to help advance these new products as well.
Yeah, so I work in research and development, and because I'm what they call a virtual field scientist, I'm not at a research station, I'm not at the headquarters, I am living in an area where I have access to a lot of pasture. So all of my relationships are with farmers because they help me do my research. And so the American farmer has been our number one collaborator when it comes to developing these herbicides. They come out to the field, they walk the fields with us, they see these products in action, and they give us feedback. So I certainly couldn't do my job without some of the core group of farmers that I've developed over the years who come in and help me. And then I also have to say, outside of that, the universities working with us. I can do about maybe half of my research. And the other half of the research, I go to my university partners and give them a protocol and say, hey, can you please test this, stretch its legs, see how far we can take it.
Yeah, Scott, I think that's you really hit on some great things there with farmers, ranchers being key collaborators. Having the experience of working in a lot of different markets within agriculture, range pasture beef production is very unique. One thing that I've learned in this business is that landowner and rancher objectives are really different and diverse. And so as we develop and collaborate on new products, and also, just continue to consult with ranchers, really sitting down and learning those diverse land objectives is key. And, great example, just here in the state of Texas, you've got farmers and ranchers really focused on maximizing their ranch, maximizing their land for cattle production, all the way over to folks that are really focused on wildlife. And so that's really what makes this market unique, is just the focus on the land and really the ability for us to sit down, understand their objectives, work on new products, new technologies, and continue to meet their needs.
I have a great story. I've been on producers' farms before doing research, and I'll test a product early in the spring, and then I'll come back with a group of cattlemen. And we'll look at that pasture. And I had one gentleman back in Kentucky. He owned a little over 1,000 acres, and he had a crew of guys mowing every year to keep his pastures in check. And he had never used herbicides. And he came out to the field day, and he saw this field and how clean it was. And he went out and bought a sprayer. He went out. And so, just when they see that and they work with us and have that relationship, it's all the difference. And the thing is, I have a dozen stories like that where we've gone on farm, made that big change, and they're sold. They're like, I can't believe I haven't been doing this.
Well, I think that is a great example of what you can provide to producers in the countryside. And we'll be right back after this quick break, and we'll talk more about sustainability along with consumers' views of sustainability with Damon and Scott after this.
Your land is a legacy, a challenge from those who tended it before you to build on their foundations. At Corteva Agriscience, we understand what it means to be the stewards of a legacy. We embrace the challenge of building on the foundation of Dow AgroSciences to maintain your trust, to bring new solutions, to help you care for your land. See how we can help build your legacy at rangeandpasture.com.
As we come back today, a question that I have is, obviously, a lot of consumers are concerned about sustainability and how farmers and ranchers take care of the environment. What is Corteva's message, and how are they working with farmers and ranchers to share how sustainable these practices truly are?
Yeah, so we're very active in helping cattle producers really articulate their message. And a couple of the things that we do is that, first of all, we have sponsored for over 20 years now the Environmental Stewardship Award Program with NCBA, and some other key sponsors like McDonald, NRCS, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And that program is just a great tool to really, look at all of these different applications and then recognize both regionally and nationally some of the stewardship practices that farmers and ranchers are doing on their land and on their ranches. And that's been a great tool. And it's really interesting because you see a lot of the same things, a lot of the same practices across regions, and it's really tough to make some of those selections for the national winner because there's so many good things going on. So being a sponsor of that program has been a key investment for us and a key tactic for us to help get that message out. And then also we are a key supporter, active participant in the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And I came into this a few years ago and went to my first U.S. Roundtable meeting, and really interesting to see all members, or I guess members representing all parts of the value chain, from cow-calf all the way down to retail, really getting together to talk about what can we do to promote, what can we do for continuous improvement as far as beef sustainability goes. And so those are just a couple of examples of where we participate, help lead, not only invest dollars, but we invest time of our folks, which is really precious today.
So what are some of those interactions you're having on the trade show floor, maybe some of the questions that producers, when they come up, are asking? I know it's probably, how do you say Corteva? A lot of them say Corteva, but I was there at the Commodity Classic a few years ago when they unveiled the new name, so I know how to say it. But what are some of those key questions or interactions you have one-on-one with these producers right here on the trade show floor?
You know, I talk with producers sometimes about just kind of how pastures degrade. And, you know, they'll come in and they'll tell me, I have this terrible problem here with this particular weed species. And we start kind of working down the line and talking about, you know, how does that problem, you know, take such a foothold on your pastures. But at the end of the day, when we look at the methods that we use to restore pastures and how they help sustainability, it kind of all goes back to making sure that land does not degrade to begin with. And so one of the conversations I like to have with producers is that you have a pasture that has very poor soil fertility, that the soil health is not there, and then you start having weed problems come into that field. And what happens is that now where you're grazing X number of acres, you're grazing X number of acres minus the amount of weed pressure out there. So effectively what's happening, you're increasing the carrying capacity on the good forage on your farm. And so you go through another season that way. And then the weeds encroach. And the pasture continues to degrade. The cattle tend to focus on the areas where the good forage is at. And the pasture continues to decline. So while we have people that are very opposed to using herbicides, when we look at things like the total number of acres that we're using, the carrying capacity, when we go in and implement a good weed management program, when we go in and we're concerned about soil health, what we do is we make all that land usable, and our carrying capacity goes up. That means that we're producing more cattle on less land. And I don't think there's a better sustainability message out there than doing more with less. And that's something that I love to bring to producers' their attention, is that when they implement these practices, that's technically what they're doing.
Yeah, we have a lot of producers that come in with the simple question of what is this weed? So I saw several people come in and, you know, showing pictures of the weed, and that's one thing that's unique about this market as well that I've learned, is just the diversity of weed species that farmers and ranchers are managing. I mean, from California to Maine, you know, down to Texas, there's a lot of diversity there. And when they come in and they say, hey, what is this weed? It really opens up that broader conversation about pasture productivity and sustainability and soil health. And so that's a lot of what we get is, hey, what is this? And it turns into a much deeper conversation.
Scott, you mentioned you grew up on a tobacco and cattle operation, and Damon, you are one generation removed from agriculture, production agriculture, excuse me. What are your messages to maybe the young people listening to this podcast that are maybe they don't have an opportunity to go back to a farm or ranch, or maybe it's going to be several years before they become part of that family operation again, on the importance of maybe pursuing careers out in the field like yourself, or whatnot? What are some of those key tips, and what should the educational system look like, and the experience, that hands-on experience out in the field, shape up to be?
I have a lot of opinions about this.
We got time.
Yeah, we've got time. I like that. I always talk to young folks about being as well-rounded as possible. Don't come out of college being a one-trick pony. Don't come out specializing and
I feel like I'm targeted right now. No.
Don't come out and say, well, yeah, I work in corn. That's what I want to do. I want to work in corn. Don't do that. Coming from a scientific background, when I meet people who are aspiring to become scientists, I tell them, when you are selling yourself to a potential employer, sell yourself as an agronomist and not a forage specialist or not a soybean specialist. You are an agronomist. You can work with any crop. All you have to do is invest the time. You can become an expert in any crop. And I would say the same thing for people who are getting into sales. Make sure that you're well-rounded as possible. If you're in an animal science program and you want to go into industry, make sure you understand all the things that go into the production of that animal. Forages being one of them, and I feel like gets missed a lot of times. And the same thing with folks who are in getting agronomy degrees. Go out and take an animal science degree. Understand where the products that you're producing are being used. So that would be my key advice for those folks.
I always joke because at Montana State I did Ag Education Relations, which is essentially an extension degree. And I say that's the liberal arts degree in the College of Ag because you get to learn about every aspect of agriculture in there. So just have to I always give a shout out to my alma mater on this podcast. I know our listeners are like, God, he needs to stop talking about Montana. It's a great place though. But Damon?
Yeah, so, my message to some of the younger folks out there would be that I think the future in agriculture is very bright, and there are a lot of opportunities. And I've seen a shift just in my tenure in some of those opportunities. I mean, you think about digital and precision ag, 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing. And so we weren't really focused on that. So in addition to agronomy, some of the basic sciences, animal science, dairy science, we've got this whole new realm of digital and how do we connect really Silicon Valley with production agriculture, and I think that's just a great new horizon for some of our young people. But I spend as leading the team here in the U.S. We spend a lot of time on succession planning and recruitment strategies for new people. And I can tell you if you've got an interest in agriculture, there's some really neat possibilities out there with companies like Corteva and back on ranches and really across the industry, across the value chain.
And the sky's the limit. That's the thing. You're talking about our digital solutions and some of the things that we're doing there. We're coming upon a generation where they'll be able to develop their own solutions on farm, given how cheap technology is. And I have this conversation. I give a presentation called Technology and Grazing Management. And one of the things I touch on are these small computer boards, the Arduino, the Raspberry Pi. Probably, I don't know if not everybody's familiar with them, but the thing is that they had more computing power than the first space shuttle or the first lander that landed on the moon. But we're making things now out of those, such as drones, 3D printers, and the limits, there are no limits to what we can do. And we're becoming very familiar with that technology. And I look for my kids to be able to build anything they want to based on how easy this and available this has become.
So, Scott, what are maybe some of those emerging technologies that Corteva is working on or collaborating with, whether it's drone technology, identifying weeds out in the pasture, just to again be more efficient, be more cost efficient as well? What does that look like? What can you share any of that, or what are maybe some of the current trends that we're doing with some of this newer technology?
I think the one that comes to my mind is LandVisor. LandVisor, this solution that we're monitoring mesquite and the productivity of the land to make sure that producers can optimize the return on investment by treating the land that's going to provide them the best return on investment first. And that's just the tip of the iceberg here, because when we look at the U.S., we look at the nearly, 500 million acres of grassland in the U.S. there's so much that we can do. The Australians they were doing this 20 years ago, what they called the Pastures from Space program, where they would send producers information on the productivity of their pastures. And I think that technology has gotten to the point now where it's so readily accessible, and the satellite information is such a high resolution that we are going to be able to start monitoring pasture production. We're going to be able to start identifying weed species at a much smaller scale.
Well, gentlemen, I think we've had a really great conversation after a late night for some of us here at the Cattle Industry Convention. I was actually in bed by 9, like I said, but is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience? Again, we have a very diverse listening audience, but I know there's a lot of people that are interested in making sure that their ranch is profitable and can be passed on to the next generation. I'll give you both the floor.
Yeah, so I guess I'd just like to continue to communicate Corteva's commitment to farmers and ranchers, and in this market segment, and what we're focused on here at CattleCon is really the rancher and our commitment to them. And at Corteva, as we've brought this new company together, we focus on a couple of things, and one of those being enriching the lives of those who produce and those who consume. And we realize that people are buying food differently than they did 10 years ago. And we really feel like we can be a great partner in providing these new solutions, new technology like LandVisor, Scott just talked about, but also helping connect the dots and standing up and advocating for science with consumers. And so we take it seriously that we've got a critical part of this. And, to continue to move agriculture forward, we're going to have to be transparent. And really talk about the science and the benefits of what we're doing in agriculture. There are no better stewards than our farmers and ranchers really have a high focus on stewardship, and it's really helping them communicate what they're doing out there.
My advice, focus on the land. We get really tied up in animal genetics, and I can walk out into a pasture with producers a lot of times, and they can tell me everything about their bulls, history in the EPDs, and that's fantastic. But when I look down in a pasture, I see, degraded soils. I see very poor forage base. And being a guy from Kentucky, I put it like this: it's like going out and buying a Corvette and saying I'm never taking it over 30 miles an hour. And so our producers are very in tune to genetics, and one thing that I would love to see us do is push more towards learning about our forage base and how we can use that forage base to optimize our genetics. And the thing is, with Corteva, we're stressing that message to make sure that our forage base is optimized to meet the needs of those genetics that we have out in the field.
Scott, I think that's a very good point and really great advice for the listeners of this podcast, and I know you've been sharing that here on the trade show floor and when you're out in the countryside working with these producers. But Scott Flynn, Damon Palmer, thank you so much for taking time during the 2020 Cattle Industry Convention to talk more about Corteva Agrisciences and all that you were doing to help the U.S. cattle producer. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, friends, for more information, you can find Corteva Agrisciences online and also give them a like on Facebook. And if you have any suggestions or requests for future shows here on the Cattlemen's Call podcast, make sure and submit those. You can find those on the ncba.org website and click on the Cattlemen's Call page. Well, that will do it for today's Cattlemen's Call podcast. We'll catch you next time. I'm Lane Nordlund.
Thanks for tuning in to NCBA's Cattlemen's Call podcast with Lane Nordlund. For more information, visit ncba.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast today.